The research station Harmony hung in space like a dying star, its once bright hull now flickering with emergency lights. Deep inside the station's core, something had gone terribly wrong. The massive containment unit that held their experimental energy source was cracking, and with each crack came a wave of invisible death. Veltam pressed his long, thin fingers against the control panel, watching the radiation readings climb higher and higher. His pale blue skin had already started turning gray around the edges, and his breathing felt labored in the thin air his people preferred. Around him, 23 other Volari scientists moved slowly through the corridors, their movements growing weaker by the hour. The Volari had always been a peaceful people. Their home world was gentle and kind, with low gravity that let them float rather than walk, an atmosphere so pure that a single breath of most other worlds would poison them. They had joined the Galactic Federation 300 years ago as researchers and scholars, contributing their brilliant minds to science, while other species handled the more dangerous work. But now, danger had found them. The containment field is down to 40%, called out Veltam's assistant Morley from across the research lab. Her voice was getting weaker, and Veltam could see the telltale signs of radiation sickness spreading across her delicate features. If it drops below 20%, the whole station will be flooded with enough radiation to sterilize a small moon. Veltam looked at the readings again. 6 rotations. That's all they had before the radiation killed them all. Maybe less if anyone was unlucky enough to be near the core when the final breach happened. Send out the distress call, he whispered, knowing it was probably pointless. All frequencies, maximum power. The communications officer, a young Volari named Polrex, worked frantically at his station. His normally steady hands shook as he input the emergency codes. Message sent, Chief Scientist. Full Federation emergency protocols activated. The distress signal shot out into the void, carrying with it the desperate plea of a dying crew. It contained everything: their location, their situation, the number of crew members, and most importantly, how little time they had left. Veltam pulled up the star charts on his personal display. The nearest Federation ship was the medical vessel Gentle Healer, staffed by the careful and methodical Zentari people. They were excellent doctors, but they moved slowly and carefully, as most civilized species did. 12 rotations away at maximum speed. Chief Scientist, Morley said quietly, I've been calculating. Even if they left immediately and pushed their engines past safety limits, they would arrive 2 rotations too late. The weight of those words settled over the research lab like a heavy blanket. Veltam had led these scientists on a mission to study exotic energy patterns near the gas giant below them. It was supposed to be safe, routine work, the kind of quiet research that his people excelled at. Now they were all going to die because of his decision to come here. The station shuddered again, and more warning lights began flashing. The artificial gravity fluctuated, making several Volari stumble and fall in their weakened state. Even a small fall could be dangerous. Sir, Polrex called out, his voice filled with confusion. I'm getting a response to our distress call. Veltam felt a flicker of hope. The Gentle Healer? No, sir, it's not a Federation ship at all. The signature says it's from something called the Human Colonial Survey Division. They're saying they can reach us in 8 rotations. Veltam's hope turned confusion, then worry. Humans? He had heard of them, but only in hushed whispers among Federation scientists. They came from a world so dangerous that most species couldn't even land on it safely. A place where the very air could poison you, where the gravity could crush your bones, where radiation from their star was strong enough to cause cancer. Are we sure they received our message correctly? Veltam asked, do they understand the radiation levels here? Polrex checked his instruments twice. Yes, sir. I sent all our sensor data. The radiation readings, the containment breach, everything. They acknowledged it all and said they're coming anyway. Around the lab, other Volari scientists had stopped their work to listen. Their large, dark eyes were filled with fear and confusion. Everyone knew the stories about Deathworld species. They were violent, unpredictable, and lived in conditions that would kill normal people in minutes. Maybe, whispered Morley, they didn't understand how dangerous it is. But Veltam was looking at the data again. These humans were coming from even further away than the Federation ship, but they would arrive in 8 rotations instead of 12. That meant they were traveling much faster than any sensible species would consider safe. What kind of people traveled at such dangerous speeds? What kind of people volunteered to fly into a radiation zone that was already killing trained scientists? As another wave of nausea hit him and his vision blurred slightly, Veltam realized they were about to find out. The humans were coming, whether the Valari understood them or not. The station's lights flickered again, and somewhere in the distance, another piece of equipment failed with a grinding sound that echoed through the corridors like a death rattle. Captain Kate Wilson stared at the emergency transmission flickering across her command screen. The alien text had been auto-translated, but the desperation in the message came through clearly in any language. 23 beings were dying slowly from radiation poisoning, trapped on a research station that was tearing itself apart. Ben, what's our ETA if we push the engines? Kate asked, her fingers already dancing across the navigation controls. Lieutenant Ben Carter ran the calculations quickly. 7.5 rotations if we redline everything. Maybe 8 if we want the engines to still work when we get there. Kate looked around the bridge at her crew of 12. They had been surveying dead systems for 3 months, looking for potential colony sites and mineral deposits. Boring work, but necessary. Now, they had a chance to actually save lives. "What about the radiation?" asked their pilot, Danny Hayes, leaning forward in his seat. "Those readings look pretty nasty." Ben pulled up the full sensor data and whistled softly. "It's hot, I'll give you that. About 20 times what we'd see during a solar flare back home. We need full radiation suits and regular rotation schedules. Nobody stays in the danger zone more than 3 hours at a time." Kate nodded. It was dangerous, but not impossible. She had worked in worse conditions during her time on the Jupiter mining platforms, where radiation and cosmic rays were just part of the job. "Amy, how's our medical supplies?" Dr. Amy Foster looked up from her medical station. Full complement of radiation meds, plus emergency treatment gear. If these Valari are anything like the other species we've met, they're probably more sensitive to radiation than we are. We should be able to help them. "Good enough for me," Kate decided. "Danny, plot our course. Maximum burn to that station. And send a response to their distress call. Tell them help is coming." As the Endurance shifted course and its engines roared to life, Kate felt the familiar weight of acceleration pressing her into her chair. Most alien species she had met were horrified by the speeds humans considered normal. They preferred slow, careful journeys with gradual acceleration that wouldn't stress their fragile bodies. But right now, gradual wouldn't save lives. Back on the dying research station, Veltam received a human response with mixed feelings. Relief that someone was coming, but growing terror as he learned more about their rescuers. "Polrex, bring up everything we have on humans in the Federation database," he ordered, his weakening voice echoing in the mostly empty command center. What Polrex found made the entire surviving crew gather around the display in shocked silence. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world, the highest danger rating in Federation records. The planet's gravity was 3 times what most species could survive. Its atmosphere contained a highly reactive gas called oxygen that caused fires and explosions. The surface was constantly bombarded by dangerous radiation from their star. "Look at this," Morley said, her voice filled with disbelief. "It says their oceans are made of liquid that would dissolve our skin. Their weather includes storms with winds that could tear apart our ships. And their temperature swings would freeze or cook most known life forms." Veltam read further, his horror growing. Humans lived on a world where the very ground could split open and swallow cities, where massive waves of water could wash away entire coastal regions, where chunks of ice the size of shuttlecraft fell from the sky regularly. "How do they survive?" whispered another scientist. The answer came in the next section of the database. Humans didn't just survive their world, they thrived on it. They'd spread across every continent, lived in deserts that would bake other species alive, and built cities and regions where the ground shook regularly. They seemed to treat natural disasters as minor inconveniences. "It says here," Polrex read with growing amazement, that young humans regularly expose themselves to their star's radiation for recreation. They call it sunbathing and consider it relaxing. The Volari exchanged worried glances. What kind of creatures found deadly radiation relaxing? But the most disturbing part was yet to come. The database showed that humans were one of the few species that actually sought out danger. They climbed mountains for fun. They dove into deep water, where pressure could crush them. They threw themselves out of aircraft with only fabric to slow their fall, calling it sport. "They're insane," Morley whispered. "We've called for help from a species of madmen." Veltam felt another wave of nausea hit him as the radiation continued its deadly work. Around the station, more equipment was failing. The life support systems were running on backup power, and even that wouldn't last much longer. "Insane or not," he said quietly, "they're the only chance we have." Through the station's observation windows, he could see the distant stars. Somewhere out there, a ship full of Deathworld survivors was racing toward them at speeds that would terrify any sane species. Whether they were being rescued or simply trading one death for another remained to be seen. The Harmony shuddered again, and another section went dark. Time was running out, and their fate now rested in the hands of beings who had somehow survived on a world that tried to kill everything that lived on it. The humans were coming, and Veltam could only hope they would all survive the encounter. The massive human ship Endurance approached the failing Volari station like a predator moving toward wounded prey. But instead of attack, it came bearing salvation. The docking procedure alone made Veltam's remaining crew nervous. Where Volari ships docked with gentle, careful movements that took nearly an hour, the humans slammed their vessel against the station's docking port with confidence that shook the entire structure. "They're not being careful," whispered Morley, watching through the security cameras as the airlock cycled. "Maybe they don't know how," Polrex replied, but his voice carried doubt. These humans had traveled faster than any reasonable species would dare, and now they were docking like they owned the station. The airlock hissed open, and the first human stepped through. Tom Blake was not what the Volari expected. He was massive by their standards, nearly twice their height and probably 10 times their weight. His skin was dark from years of working under radiation that would have killed them instantly. But what shocked them most was his casual attitude. He looked around the contaminated docking bay like he was inspecting a garden shed. "Radiation's spiking pretty good in here," he said into his communication device. "Nothing we can't handle, but I'll need the heavy gear for the reactor core." Behind him came Dr. Jack Miller, carrying medical equipment that looked primitive compared to Volari technology, but somehow more reliable. Where Volari medical tools were delicate instruments requiring perfect conditions, the human equipment looked like it could survive being dropped off a cliff. "Where you're injured?" Jack asked Veltam directly, not bothering with the formal greeting protocols that usually took 20 minutes between species. Veltam pointed toward the medical bay with a trembling finger. 18 of my crew are there. The other 5 they didn't make it." Jack nodded grimly and headed toward the medical bay without hesitation. He walked through sections of the station where radiation alarms were screaming warnings in 3 different languages. The human didn't even seem to notice. "Your friend," Veltam said to Tom, "he's walking into areas that will kill him in minutes." Tom looked confused. "This?" He gestured around at the flashing warning lights and radiation symbols. "Nah, this is like working near a medical scanner back home. A little elevated, but nothing serious. We got guys who work in worse conditions every day at the solar collection stations." The Volari scientist felt his world tilt. Conditions that were killing his people were considered mild by these humans. What kind of world had they come from? Tom suited up in what he called standard radiation gear, which looked like it could protect someone from a nuclear explosion. But even more shocking was his attitude. He chatted casually with his team as they prepared to enter the reactor core, talking about weekend plans and complaining about the coffee on their ship. "Kate, I'm heading into hot zone now," Tom reported to his captain. "Should have this sorted in a couple hours. The containment breach isn't too bad. Looks like their safety systems just couldn't handle the pressure buildup." Captain Kate Wilson's voice came back through the communication system. "Copy that, Tom. Don't take any unnecessary risks. Amy, how are our patients?" Dr. Amy Foster had joined Jack in the medical bay and was examining the dying Valari with instruments that seemed far too simple for such advanced medicine. They're in rough shape, but nothing we haven't seen before. Remember the mining accident on Titan? This is similar radiation exposure, maybe a bit less. Veltam listened to this conversation in growing amazement. A mining accident on Titan? They were comparing his crew's deadly situation to some routine industrial accident from their past? The Valari physiology is more sensitive than ours, Amy continued, but the treatment protocols should be similar. I'm starting them on broad-spectrum radiation meds and cellular repair boosters. Through the monitors, Veltam watched Tom Blake walk calmly into the reactor core area. This was a section where 3 of his best engineers had died within minutes. The human was whistling a tune as he examined the damaged containment field. "Oh, I see the problem," Tom announced cheerfully. "The magnetic bottle collapsed because your power coupling couldn't handle the resonance feedback. Happens all the time with this type of setup. We'll need to reroute the primary power grid and install some dampening fields." The Valari crew gathered around the monitors, watching in stunned silence as a human began working with tools that seemed designed for construction rather than delicate repair work. Where Valari engineering required precision instruments and careful, patient work, Tom was using what looked like a hammer to adjust components worth more than most ships. "Is he going to break everything?" Polrex asked nervously. But somehow it was working. The radiation levels in that section began dropping as Tom rerouted power and reinforced the containment field with methods that no Valari engineer would ever consider. His approach was crude, direct, and completely effective. Humans, Veltam realized with growing wonder, don't just survive impossible conditions. They make impossible conditions work for them. In the medical bay, his crew members were already showing signs of improvement under Dr. Miller's treatment. The humans had brought medicine designed for a species that regularly survived radiation exposure, and it was proving far more effective than anything in Valari medical science. The rescue was working, but it was nothing like what any Federation species would consider proper procedure. The humans were treating their deadly crisis like routine maintenance, fixing in hours what Valari experts said was impossible to repair. And they were doing it all while whistling, chatting, and complaining about their coffee. Tom Blake pulled a small device from his toolkit that made every Valari in the room step back in alarm. It looked like a weapon, sleek and metallic with warning symbols that their translators couldn't even process properly. "This is just a shaped charge," Tom explained, holding the device up like it was a screwdriver. "We'll place these at key points along the contaminated sections, blow out the damage panels, then seal everything back up with emergency welding. Should take about 4 hours total." Veltam felt his heart racing, which wasn't helping his radiation sickness. "You want to detonate explosives inside our station?" "Well, yeah," Tom said, looking genuinely confused by the question. "How else would you vent contaminated sections? The radiation has to go somewhere, and we can't just wish it away." The Valari crew exchanged terrified glances. In 300 years of space travel, no Federation species had ever considered using explosives as a repair method. The very idea went against every safety protocol they had ever learned. "Back on Earth," Tom continued, completely oblivious of their horror, "we use controlled demolition all the time. When the big earthquake hit Los Angeles in 2157, we had to bring down half the city just to rebuild it safely. Explosives are precise tools when you know what you're doing. Your planet has earthquakes that destroy entire cities?" Morley asked weakly. "Oh, sure," Tom replied, beginning to set up his equipment. "The San Andreas fault runs right through California. We get major quakes every few decades. Most buildings are designed to handle them now, but back in the old days, whole cities would just collapse." Dr. Jack Miller joined the conversation as he finished treating another Valari patient. "That's nothing compared to hurricane season," he said cheerfully. "I grew up in Florida. Every year from June to November, we get these massive storms that could flatten entire counties. Winds over 200 miles per hour, storm surges that pushed ocean water 50 miles inland." Veltam's translator was having trouble with some of these concepts. Storm surges. "Imagine if someone picked up your ocean and threw it at your cities," Jack explained. "That's basically what happens. My hometown got hit 3 times when I was a kid. We just rebuilt it each time and made it stronger. Captain Kate Wilson's voice came through the communication system as she coordinated the repair efforts. Tom, how's the placement going? We got another section showing stress fractures near the main power coupling. Almost ready, Captain, Tom replied, carefully positioning another explosive charge. Though we might want to evacuate the Volari to our ship before we start. No point in them getting rattled by the noise. The noise? Veltam asked faintly. Yeah. Controlled explosions are pretty loud, Tom said matter-of-factly. Nothing compared to a thunderstorm, but it might startle you guys. Lieutenant Ben Carter had joined them in the contaminated section, wearing his radiation suit like it was everyday clothing. Speaking of thunderstorms, he said to Tom, remember that camping trip in Colorado? We got caught in that lightning storm on the mountain. Oh man, that was intense, Tom laughed, continuing to work with his explosives. Lightning was hitting the ground every few seconds. We just hunkered down in our tent and waited it out. Great light show, though. The Volari listened to this conversation with growing disbelief. These humans were discussing being struck by lightning like it was entertainment. Your people camp in lightning storms? Polrex asked. Well, not on purpose, Ben replied. But weather can change fast in the mountains. You learn to roll with it. Besides, the odds of actually getting hit are pretty low. Only about 1 in a million. But if you do get hit, Veltam pressed. Usually you die, Ben said casually. But sometimes people survive. My uncle got hit twice. Made his hair stand up funny for years afterward. Danny Hayes joined the conversation from the pilot's position. At least lightning is quick. Try living through a volcanic eruption. I was stationed on Hawaii when Mount Kilauea decided to have a bad day. Lava everywhere, ash blocking out the sun, poisonous gases in the air. We just evacuated the immediate area and waited for it to calm down. Your planet has exploding mountains. Morley asked in a voice barely above a whisper. Hundreds of them, Danny replied cheerfully. Most are dormant, but we keep an eye on the active ones. Yellowstone is the big one everyone worries about. If that one goes off, it could affect the entire planet for years. And you still live there? Veltam asked. Kate's voice came through the speakers again, warm with amusement. Where else would we go? Earth made us who we are. Sure, it tries to kill us regularly, but we've gotten pretty good at not dying. Ready for detonation, Tom announced, finishing his setup. Everyone might want to cover their ears, or whatever you use for hearing. Veltam realized that in the span of a few hours, he had learned more about human resilience than the Federation had discovered in decades of contact. These beings didn't just survive impossible conditions. They treated them as normal parts of life. Your world tried to kill you every day, he whispered in amazement. Captain Kate Wilson appeared in person in the command center, her radiation suit making her look like some kind of armored warrior. She smiled at Veltam with genuine warmth. Still does, she said simply. We just got stubborn about it. The explosions that followed were controlled, precise, and absolutely terrifying everyone except the humans, who treated them like a fireworks display. The final explosion echoed through the station's corridors, but this time it wasn't destruction. It was the sound of new hull plating being welded into place. Tom Blake emerged from the reactor core section, pulling off his radiation helmet and wiping sweat from his forehead. That should do it. He announced a group of Volari scientists who had been watching his every move through the monitors. Radiation levels are back to normal. Well, normal for you folks. Still a bit high for most species, but nothing that'll hurt you. Veltam looked at his instruments in disbelief. 8 hours ago, this station had been a death trap. Now the radiation readings were lower than they had been before the accident started. How is this possible? The containment field was just overloaded, Tom explained, packing away his tools. We reinforced the magnetic bottle with some spare parts from our ship and rerouted the power flow through secondary systems. Basic engineering, really. Basic engineering. Veltam wanted to laugh, but he was too weak. What the humans called basic engineering had saved his entire crew and restored their station to better condition than it had been in years. Dr. Jack Miller finished his final examination of the last Volari patient. Everyone's responding well to the radiation treatment, he reported. You'll all feel tired for a few days, but there shouldn't be any permanent damage. Just take it easy and drink plenty of fluids. Amy Foster handed Veltam a small container of medicine. These are for the next week, she said kindly. 1 pill every 12 hours. They'll help your cells repair any remaining damage. What kind of medicine is this? Veltam asked, examining the simple-looking pills. Standard radiation recovery supplements, Amy replied. We give these to workers who spend time in high-radiation environments. Solar panel installers, nuclear plant technicians, deep space miners. Pretty common stuff back home. Pretty common stuff. Medicine that could save his entire species from radiation poisoning was something humans handed out like candy to their workers. As the human crew prepared to leave, Veltam made his way to the communication station. His hands were steadier now, thanks to the human medicine, and his skin was already beginning to return to its normal pale blue color. Polrex, open a priority channel to the Federation Science Council. Yes, Chief Scientist. Veltam thought carefully about his words. This message would be read by scientists across the galaxy, species who had studied the universe for thousands of years. How could he explain what he had witnessed? When the universe attempts termination protocols, he began slowly, contact the species that refused to comply. He paused, then added more. Note for the record, humans have redefined the concept of impossible. Their solutions work not because they are elegant or safe, but because they refuse to accept failure as an option. Recommend immediate consultation with human engineers for any crisis previously deemed unsolvable. On the bridge of the Endurance, Captain Kate Wilson was looking at her communication display with mild amusement. Tom, we got 14 new distress signals that came in while you were working. 14? Tom asked, joining her on the bridge. That's more than usual. Word travels fast in space, Kate replied. Looks like we got a mining ship trapped in an asteroid field, a research vessel caught in gravity well, and something about a colony that's stuck in the path of a solar flare. Ben Carter looked up from his navigation station. The mining ship is closest, about 6 hours at maximum burn. The others are scattered across 3 different systems. The solar flare situation sounds urgent, Danny Hayes added. They got 2,000 colonists and nowhere to run. Kate studied the messages for a moment, then shrugged. We'll hit the mining ship first, then swing by the gravity well problem. The solar flare issue. Ben, send those coordinates to the Defiance. They're closer to that sector. Copy that, Captain. Tom was already pulling up technical specifications for asteroid extraction equipment. The mining ship shouldn't be too bad. Probably just need to blast them out of whatever rock they're stuck in. Blast them out? Veltam asked, overhearing the conversation. Sure, Tom replied. You use shaped charges to fracture the asteroid around the ship, then pull them free with tractor beams. We do it all the time in the belt. Dr. Jack Miller joined them, carrying his medical bag. I'll prep the medical bay for potential injuries. Asteroid rescue can get messy. As the Endurance undocked from a now-safe Harmony, Veltam and his crew gathered at the observation windows to watch their rescuers depart. The human ship accelerated away at speeds that made their artificial gravity system strain, heading toward another impossible rescue with the same casual confidence they had shown here. They're insane, Morley said quietly. No, Veltam corrected, watching the human ship disappear into the stars. They're just from a world that made them stronger than they have any right to be. Across the galaxy, the message was spreading through Federation channels. When you needed the impossible done, when the universe itself seemed determined to kill you, there was now a new option. Call the Deathworlders. They had turned survival into an art form, and they were willing to share.